Now in this episode, I'm going to be discussing what's next for the LA Clippers. Now this is the second video of my 7-part series as I'll be previewing some of the top teams in the NBA for the 2021 season. Now, as we all know, after a stunning, shocking upset in the second round of the 2020 playoffs, the LA Clippers, who were up 3-1 on the Denver Nuggets, blew double-digit leads not just once, in Game 5, Game 6, and Game 7, and got sent up out of that bubble quick, fast, and in a hurry. So now that they've gone ahead and started remaking this whole team over, where you got Doc Rivers is out, Ty Lue's in, Chauncey Billups is in as assistant coach, they got players out, new players coming in. So now we got to take a look and see, how does this offseason for the LA Clippers, how does that stack up to the rest of the teams? What are the positives? What are the negatives of this roster as we head into this new season? And what is the outlook for this team? Are they still a contender? Number one, are they still a contender? And how do they stack up in the rest of the Western Conference? So make sure to stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to be breaking it all down. And then I'll also be leaving you with the preview for my next video as far as the third team in the 7-part series. Man, let's go ahead and get into it.
Are you ready?
Welcome back to Journey for Ballaholic, the best talk show for basketball addicts. I'm your host, General Hannibal X. Now, if you're new on this channel here, you're going to be getting my passionate and in-depth analysis on the hottest NBA and college basketball topics. Listen, I'm a ballaholic. I'm absolutely addicted to basketball. But just like everybody, I've got my own opinions. But if you like opinions that are backed by facts, go ahead and hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And also, be sure to hit that bell notification and turn that bell notification to all so that way you can be updated whenever I drop new videos, which is every Monday and Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, with this whole YouTube algorithm, as we're trying to figure this thing out, make sure that you go ahead and hit the like button on these videos and leave a comment down below. That way the YouTube algorithm will know that you like this and it'll share it with as many people as possible. Let's get the subscriber count up as high as we can get it. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the beginning of this video because there's a lot of positives and we got to go over some of the negatives with this LA Clipper remake because listen, the battle for LA 2.0, it has begun. The Lakers won the championship last year and the Clippers are trying to rebound and trying to get further than they've ever been before in their franchise history. You gotta remember, it's been a lot of great players that have come through LA, as far as the Clippers that is. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, you got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George now. This franchise has never been to the Western Conference Finals. So if they're gonna make it past the second round, if they're gonna finally get to the conference finals at least, a lot of things had to change. And one of the things you had to start with, which I kind of love and kind of respect what Steve Ballmer did, was he got Doc Rivers up out of there. You cannot be the coach of a team, the head coach in particular, of a team that is as stacked as the Clippers were, had a 3-1 lead, and then absolutely melt. Now, this wasn't Doc Rivers' first rodeo with being up 3-1, as we know. He did it before back in Orlando when he was up 3-1. He did it before with this Clippers team when he had Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and them against the Houston Rockets. So we've seen a Doc Rivers-led team, unfortunately, do this on 3 separate occasions. Third strike, you're out. So they got him up out of there and they replaced him with the assistant coach, Ty Lue. Now I'm gonna tell you why that is a benefit and why that's a positive for this LA Clipper team for this upcoming season. One of the biggest benefits, I think, is floor spacing. You're gonna see the Clippers this year a much better offensive team. I'm gonna tell you exactly why. Ty Lue, just go back to when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers. When he first took over the Cavs were like a middling 3-point shooting team. When he took over the same team, basically, they started taking many more threes. You're going to see that with this Clippers team. This Clippers team was one of the best shooting, from a percentage standpoint, one of the best shooting teams last year from 3. They were one in the bottom third, like ranked number 22nd or something in 3-point attempts. They just weren't taking enough threes. So I think that's one of the biggest and most important things when you have guys like Kawhi, when you have guys like Paul George, Lou Williams, you've got other guys that we'll get into that they brought over to their roster. You've got 3-point shooters. You got to utilize those guys. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest advantages is this Clippers team's offense is going to open up. Number one. Number two, I think the big man, Big Zoo Blocker, thinks we get more playing time. For whatever reason, and I kind of understand it, Zubac was not very good in the pick and roll defense. He just wasn't very good. You got to call it what it was. But he was their best rim protector. And their biggest disadvantage, particularly, let's go back to round 2 of the playoffs against Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, they didn't have a legitimate 7-foot rim protector in there, and they were playing Montrezl Harrell, who's about 6'8", trying to guard Jokic, and he was getting annihilated. But the minutes that Zubac was on the floor, they were actually outplaying the Denver Nuggets. So that was bad coaching from Doc Rivers to not play Zubac more and to play Montrezl Harrell on Jokic a lot less. So I think you'll see more minutes for Zubac, which will help because I think his game is continuing to expand. And I think Doc Rivers, in the last 2 playoffs we've seen, Zubac just has been limited in the amount of playing time that he's gotten. And I think Ty Lue is going to utilize him much more. But I think one of the biggest keys is, and it was kind of a smaller move, the kind of move that really didn't get a lot of hype because it wasn't necessarily a free agency signing, but it was a trade for Landry Shamet going out and Luke Kennard coming in. Now, I gotta put this caveat on here. Luke Kennard's gotta stay healthy. That's one of the biggest downfalls with him thus far through his career has been his injury history. But when he's on the court, man, Luke Kennard brings a lot of what the Clippers need. Now, Landry Shamet, I think, is a better defender, so I think there's kind of a step back there for the Clippers from a defensive standpoint, but that's not drastic at all. I think the biggest plus and the biggest bonus with adding Kennard over a Luke Shamet, over a Landry Shamet, is the playmaking and the shot creating that we saw from Kennard when he was at Duke University, even over at Detroit. We saw Kennard being able to not only catch and shoot, because he's going to get a lot of catch and shoot opportunities on this team, but I think he's going to be one of those guys you can actually put the ball in his hand, and a lot of the threes that he made were off him creating his own shot and getting his own shot up and being able to hit those threes. So he's going to be able to provide that element that Landry Shamet really couldn't do, as he was just strictly just a 3-and-D catch and shoot offensive player. So I think that's going to benefit them, particularly in one of their biggest weaknesses, which we'll get to, which really is just a lack of a true facilitator. But off the bench, when you're talking about Luke Kennard with his size around 6'4", being able to play in the backcourt with the Lou Williams, who's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, as we know. Luke Kennard as a secondary playmaker, secondary shot creator, I think would be definitely a benefit to this bench, who has kind of taken a hit as far as from a depth perspective, but we'll get into that when we get to more of the negatives. Now, one of the other positives that I got to touch on, this clearly was the biggest move for the Clippers in the offseason, was the insertion of Serge Ibaka in replacement for Montrezl Harrell. Now, I want to be very clear here. I honestly, at this point in both of their careers, I don't think that Montrezl Harrell is a worse player than Serge Ibaka. I don't think the Serge is greatly a better player. I think he's an absolutely better fit for this Clipper team than Montrezl Harrell is. So understand there's a difference there. Serge Ibaka, what he brings is exactly, I'm talking about to the T, exactly what the Clippers needed last year. He's a 7-footer, he's a legit rim protector, but unlike Zubac or Montrezl Harrell, he can actually step out to the 3-point line. He's going to open that floor. Remember we talked about adding a Ty Lue as the head coach is going to open this offense up. Adding Serge Ibaka will definitely do that as well from a personnel standpoint. Remember Kevin Love with Cleveland Cavaliers, how he was out shooting a lot of threes. Serge Ibaka is going to be in that role. He's going to take a lot of threes. And surprisingly, what a lot of people may not know, Serge Ibaka leads the entire NBA in the history of the NBA game as far as players who average a career 2 or more blocks, who he shoots the highest 3-point percentage all time at 36% from 3, while also being a legitimate rim protector. So you're getting literally the best of both worlds as far as what the Clippers need, rim protection and 3-point shooting from their big man. So I love this addition. I think from a cultural standpoint, from a locker room standpoint, adding Ibaka is going to be an addition by subtraction with taking Montrezl Harrell out from the chemistry standpoint, but also from the skill set standpoint as well. So I love that addition. Now, adding Ty Lue over Doc Rivers, giving more playing time to Zubac, adding a Kennard over a Landry Shamet, adding a Ibaka over a Montrezl Harrell, all those moves I love. But everything's not rosy with the Clippers. And I'm going to keep it real with you. One thing y'all know, I'm going to keep it real. The Clippers, to me, they still have deficiency. Their biggest deficiency, which was a real loss in this offseason battle between the two LA teams, because there was a battle going on that has been going even back to last year when Kawhi Leonard was trying to hold the Lakers hostage before deciding to go to the Clippers. And that battle, which was won technically last year, supposedly, to the Clippers, has clearly gone to the Lakers this season. And one of the biggest pieces that the Clippers needed to get was to steal Rajon Rondo away from the Lakers. Well, Rondo left the Lakers, but he didn't come to the Clippers. And that's going to really hurt them because they still don't have a true facilitating point guard. Keep in mind, most of the guys on this Clippers team are score-first guys. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Lou Williams. Now, they got rid of a couple score-first minded guys in Reggie Jackson and Montrezl Harrell, but you didn't really replace them with what you needed most, which is a guy who's going to make the game easier on Kawhi. Who's going to create shots for Kawhi Leonard? Patrick Beverley, that's not his role. He's a 3-and-D point guard. Lou Williams is out there looking to score first and score second and then pass third. So Luke Kennard maybe could fill that role, but he's really a shooter. He's not necessarily an elite facilitator by any stretch of the imagination. Who's going to be that guy to make the game easier for the stars? They still don't have that, in my opinion. So I think that is one of the negatives for this Clipper team. And then I think another thing we got to keep in mind, even though I like the addition of Ibaka, as far as specifically for Montrezl Harrell, it wasn't just Montrezl Harrell that the Clippers lost up front. They also lost a very key piece that kind of underrated, actually, in JaMychal Green. It seemed like JaMychal Green, every shot he took in the playoffs, he was hitting, it seemed like. JaMychal Green, he could play defense. Not a defensive stopper by any stretch, but he could play defense, and he was hitting that and knocking down threes at a very high clip. So you lose Montrezl Harrell and you lose JaMychal Green in that front court off the bench, and you only replace him with Serge Ibaka, really. So the depth on this Clippers roster is kind of gotten smaller. Once again, you lose Shaman and you lose Reggie Jackson, but you only replace him with Luke Kennard. So the Clippers, who were last year really was about a 10-deep team, now they're about what, 8 maybe? 8 at the. I mean, you got your starting 5. You got Ibaka, who's likely going to come off the bench. You got Lou Williams coming off the bench, and then you have Luke Kennard off the bench. Other than those three, who are the other quality? I'm talking about quality rotational players that you can count on night in and night out. I don't think they have that anymore. I think this team went from 10 deep to 8 deep, and that's not necessarily, it doesn't mean that it has to be a bad thing, but where it could truly hurt them is when they want to load manage. Remember, Kawhi Leonard wants to play only about 60 games during an 82-game season. So now it's only a 72-game season. What do he want us to play? 55 games now? So if he's going to be sitting out 10, 15 games, how are you going to maintain, when your bench has now gotten weaker, how do you maintain staying in games? This West has gotten much more competitive even than it was last year. So I think that's going to hurt them from that aspect if Kawhi Leonard still wants to load manage, and I think he needs to. Even though I don't think it's good for the team, I think he needs to from a physical and a health standpoint if he's going to have a long playoff run. Now, that kind of leads us into, where do I see this team? Where do I project this team being based on all these moves that they made? Like I said, I love some of the moves. Some moves, I think they kind of dropped the ball in some issues, some places. I would have loved to have seen another big man. You know, for instance, whether it was an Aaron Baines, whether it was a Hassan Whiteside, whether it was, you know, a Marc Gasol, whether it was a list of guys out there, I would have loved to see them add another big man, because honestly, if Serge Ibaka is your best big man, let's think about that. Is Serge Ibaka their best big man? Or is Marcus Morris their best big man? Or Zubac. One of those are their top and their best big man. In my opinion, you can't win a championship if one of those guys is your best big man. Second or third, I get that. But your top guy, I don't see it happening. This Clippers team, is still flawed. The roster is still not championship level, in my opinion. I think the Clippers are going to still be the elite regular season team. I think the defense is going to take a step forward. I definitely think that the defense, when you add a Serge Ibaka, is going to take a step forward. You still got Patrick Beverley, still got Kawhi, Paul George, so the defense will still be elite. But I just don't like what I'm seeing in the direction this Clippers team is going. I think they actually, possibly, I'm not going to say they necessarily took a step back, but they just kind of stayed the same while a lot of other teams are getting better in the Western Conference. So with that being said, my prediction and projection for this Clippers team, I see them at best being the number 2 seed during the regular season, at best. And that's if Kawhi Leonard does do a bunch of load management. But I see them as a number 2 seed, and I think that the peak that they get to, best case scenario, is making the Western Conference Finals. Now, that's what I had for them last year, and they weren't able to get there. So I'm hoping that maybe this year I'll be right, and we could potentially see them get further than they've ever gotten before. But as of right now, that's my prediction. So you can go down to the comment section below, and you can let me know what you're projecting for this LA Clippers team. But as of right now, number 2 seed, Western Conference Finals, best case scenario. Now, worst case scenario, this team, man, they could catapult down the standings. So I could see them being a 4th or 5th seed. In all honesty, if Kawhi Leonard has to load manage, or if they get an injury because of that lack of depth, I can honestly see this team being a 4th or 5th seed, worst case scenario. So, you know, that can lead to a first round exit. Once again, I mean, you got to think there's teams like the Houston Rockets who still have 2 stars. There's teams like the Golden State Warriors who are getting Klay Thompson, or Steph Curry back. The Lakers, the Nuggets. I mean, the Phoenix Suns are better. You still got the Utah Jazz. You got the Portland Trailblazers. There's so many teams in the West. It's going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough. Now, make sure that you stick around for the next episode, because, listen, I'm going to take this thing to the next level because if I talk about the Clippers, I got to talk about the big boys. We got to talk about the LA Lakers. So we'll be doing the Lakers. I got a video coming up on the Rockets. We got the Boston Celtics, the Miami Heat. Listen, you do not want to miss this series. Like I said, this is a 7-part series. This is just part 2. If you missed the video where I broke down the Toronto Raptors, you can go ahead and click the box here. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and click the link right here. Until next time, make sure that y'all stay safe in the streets. Until then, peace.